Guys, like always, welcome back to Ruck and Roll. And the South African Rugby World Cup squad has been finalized and announced. And oh boy, was it a shocker initially. Yes, the shocker was no Andre Pollard in this team, no Lucanio Am in this team. Two big shockers. Andre Pollard, we know what that man means on a fly-off position. And then Lucanio Am, I think player of the year last year or the year before, so instrumental and rated as one of the best outside centers in the world. Both out of this team. So initially it was a shock to me. Let's look at the team. Initially it was a shock to me. But the more I looked into the team, I understood where the Springboks was coming from. I watched the press conference with Jacques Nienaber, and he gave some kind of like insights in why they picked this team. And it's not the forwards as much that's worrying. It is the backs that's worrying right now for the Springboks. And why I'm saying this is, it's in a bit of disarray. They might be forced, their hand might be forced to play players out of position, and kind of that it's a bit of a concern. But let's get into it. The first shocker is you got 4 scrum-halves in this team. So at first I was like, but why? Why would you put four scrum-halves in the team? And that's when I listened to Jacques Nienaber explain that they've picked Faf de Klerk, Jaden Hendrickse, Grant Williams, and Kobus Reinach. Now the thought here is that they say that Grant Williams they can also use as a wing because he is blinding fast, and I think he would actually make a really, really good wing. Without a lot of work, you can probably put that guy into a wing position and he will be just fine. He's a bit small, but I mean, how many times have the Springboks proved that small means nothing on wings? They play with heart. So Grant Williams can also play wings, so that's why they've put him in there. And then they feel that Faf de Klerk could be the third option for fly-off. Now, that doesn't sit well with me, but hey, what can I say, I think for a third fly-off, with the current situation, with the 2 fly-offs they've got there, which is Mani Libbok and Damian Willemse, I think Faf de Klerk is a third option. I just don't know. I just don't see it. I don't know how you want to do that in a World Cup. So then they'll have to play Faf at 10, in these pre-matches. And again, they're not starting to build combinations. They keep changing around the team, and I don't think it's healthy. So I don't particularly like Faf de Klerk as the third option. I would rather say look at a Willie Leroux as the third option. You still have the likes of a few other options that you can play at 15. Damian Willemse. You can probably slot Kanan Moody at number 15. He's also played that. You can play Jesse Creel or a Grant Williams at 15. So there's many options at 15, but I would rather play Willie Leroux as the third option for 10, as he has been playing that in Japan for the last season. So he'd be able to do that. Then going on, you'd think, okay, that's the only problems. The only thing that's strange. Then the next thing is they quite light on centers. They've only got Damian Willemse, Jesse Kuhl, and Andre Estreisen now without Lucanio Am. So what they're saying there is Creel will slot into Am's position as the number 13, which sometimes he's got good games, but sometimes he's just not great to me personally. It's not that he's bad, he's just not outstanding. But they also have the option where before they've moved Damian Delilindi from 12 to 13. Now imagine they play Andre Estreisen at 12 and Damian Delilindi at 13. That's 2 very, very strong centers to play. But again, it's moving players out of their positions. As I'm talking about this backline, all we are saying is somewhere along the way, certain players are going to be played out of position, which it's just worrying when you just before World Cup you haven't found your form. The backline's been a bit in disarray, being changed all the time, and there's no kind of combinations being formed, and you're in the pool of death, really. But anyway, let's keep going then. On wings, we've got Kurtley Arendse, which probably will be specialized on wing. And we've got Cheslin Colby, which again can play utility, probably can even slot back into fullback. I forgot to mention Cheslin Colby has played in France in the top 14. He's played fullback, so he can also slot into fullback position. He's also utility. And then they've got Makazole Mapimpi, which is pretty much a specialized wing. And then they've got Kanan Moody, which they say has also played some 13. I wouldn't say specialized at all or played a lot, but he can also play 13. He can play 14, and he has played fullback before. So, look, a lot of players, they have utility. Don't get me wrong. And I think that's why they've picked so many scrum-halves, is to have the options of utility. But, I mean, guys, you tell me you want to play Faf de Klerk on 10 in a World Cup when he's barely ever played under Test match rugby in that position. I don't like that idea, and it just shows me again is the coaching staff really looking outside the box. Why they wouldn't rather look at on a late up call caller Rob de Prier, who's been pretty amazing overseas. There's options, so why do this? But I think it's because they need to stick within the squad that they have prepped for the World Cup. They're part of the team. They don't want to go reach outside the team now. Anyway, the backs are in a bit of disarray, but there's one thing I need to mention, and this is what Jacques Nienaber explained, is that they say Handré Pollard is pretty much already decently fit for the World Cup. He probably just needs another 2 or 3 weeks to get through some tests, and then he'll be totally ready. So they're taking him with, and Lucanio Am, with on this three game prep warm-up games before the World Cup, because they feel he's going to be ready, and if someone gets an injury either in the warm-ups or in the World Cup, he will probably be the first option. And the other one is Lucanio Am. They say he's looking at about 4 weeks, so just within the first game in the World Cup he will also be ready. Now guys, we know what happens at World Cups. Teams get injuries. It just happens. And for the Springboks having to still play Wales and having the mammoth test against the All Blacks, or it's almost like a test. Let's be honest, the All Blacks and the Springboks are not going to lay down for that game. And there might be injuries before then. And I think this is the one time I think Jacques Nienaber won't say it out loud. But within the next 2-3 weeks, he'll probably be silently asking for, and you should never say that, but some player to get injured. So his next option will be to bring Pollard right back into the mix. And that changes the whole thing when Pollard's back in the mix. And who knows, maybe later in the World Cup, even Lucanio Am comes back into the mix. But I wouldn't be as concerned with Am as what I am with Pollard. Purely because there's another reason why you have to worry with Pollard being there. And that is your set kicking. And this is where the Springboks have got the biggest worry, in my opinion. Jacques Nienaber is like, it's all dependent on the day. Anyone, he's like, it doesn't matter because on the day, we've let different players kick, and we got 7 out of 7. And another day we played with a specialized fly-off and they missed. But I don't agree with that. When we've got Pollard in good form, he's got a 83 or 85% success rate. I don't agree with the fact that they saying it doesn't matter. These games at World Cups could be dependent on 3 to 6 points in penalties missed and all of that. We see Manie Libbok missed a few. He pulled it back at the end in the second half, but Damian Willemse had not been kicking well. They say he's been training hard at his place kicking. But both those guys are not dependable when it comes to place kicking. So you really want to Pollard back in if you could. But hey, if there's no injuries, this is the team. And yeah, that just poses some questions around place kicking. It poses some questions around what are they going to do with Damian Willemse in the next few warm-up games. Are they actually going to be playing him in the 10 position? Is he going to start some games? Will he come up second half? Because Manie Libbok has also not had a lot of opportunities at 10. So, guys, a million questions is being asked around these backs. But I think the Springboks have been forced into this because I think the one place where they've kind of in my opinion, lacked a little bit is when they looked at fly-offs, you know, they kind of took Yankees as a fly-off, but then eventually decided, oh, he's not in the mix. So they should have picked the third guy, Rob de Preer, as someone to bring as a third option. There is enough fly-offs in South Africa to kind of have options for if someone gets injured. And I think there they dropped the ball a bit. They will never admit that, obviously, but on the fly-off position, I feel they've dropped the ball a bit. On the center position where they've lost, there's enough utility and you can get away with that. But your fly-off is so instrumental on the field. Having a good place kicker that can be there all the time to actually be like a solid at his kicking. So guys, they have challenges, but let me put it to you this way. The Springboks still has an amazing team here if they can just get, in my opinion, Pollard back in this team with one injury. It changes the whole thing. So don't think this is the team set in stone. The next call-up, I guarantee you, will be Pollard. And that's if someone gets injured, which I often see in World Cups happen. So if the Springboks get half an opportunity to see someone's injured, if they have enough of a reason, they will bring in Pollard into the mix here. So I wouldn't write Pollard off and not even for that much of a reason, you know. Anyway, let's move on, and I'm digressing. If we look in the forwards, Steven Kitshoff's there. By the way, guys, if you look at my team, I almost picked this exact team. I just didn't pick Kobus Reinig. And I also just didn't pick Kobus Reinig and Jaden Hendriksen, the two that I didn't pick. But I mean, I didn't expect them to take 4 scrum-halves to the World Cup. But anyway, that's the two I didn't pick. With the forwards, Kitshoff's there, Vincent Koch's there, brilliant. Malherbe's there, Oxenchair's there. I called that they'll pick him even though he's injured. Trevor Nakane is there. Malcolm Marx is there. Bongyu Manambi is there. They've done exactly what I thought they'd do. They've put in Dion Fourie instead of a third hooker. They've decided to take Dion Fourie as a utility. He can play in any position. He could be a hooker or he could play the trio. And then they've gone with the same players that I called for locks: Eben Etzebeth, Marvin Orie, Argeus Neyman, and John Klein. And then on the loose forwards, they picked Peter Steph de Toy, like I called it, Kwaku Smith, like I called it, Siya Kolisi. The only one they called, which I didn't, but obviously that's because of the injuries. If I knew there was these injuries and these players wouldn't be able to make it, I would have definitely would have put in Marco van Staden. Marco van Staden has also made the team now. Dwayne Vermeulen's there, Franco Mostert, Jasper Wiese, and as I mentioned, Dion Fourie. So looking at that forwards, I think there's only one there if I'm looking at it quickly, and that's Marco van Staden that I did not pick in this team. So 2 players wrong, even with all these injuries. 2 or 3 players wrong. So I did pretty well again with calling my World Cup squad, even with the injuries. Obviously, those 2 guys was wrong, definitely. So I got 3 wrong, but that's because also of injury. So pretty close. Unfortunately for the likes of Roos, he didn't make it. It was Yankees, the scrum-half, didn't make it. But I mean, yeah, and then I think it's the one prop from Grobelaar that didn't make it. But as for everyone else, like they still taking Joseph Dweba as well to the warm-up games as backup if one of the hookers have to get injured. They're putting, if Dion Fourie or one of the hookers get injured, they still got Dweba in the mix for the warm-up games as backup. And they still got John Luke. That's the other one. And they still got John Luke, de Preer, also as a backup. So these guys are not part of a squad, but they have all the backup guys. So you've got a Pollard as backup, as backup, Dweba as a backup, and de Preer as a backup. So you've got enough backup in the team. But I do think that if there's one option, it's definitely going to be the next injury should bring Pollard back into this team. So I wouldn't write it off that this is the final team, guys. I know a lot of people are like, I don't know, up in arms. If this is the final team and they are unlucky enough that they don't get an injury, I hope I'd never say something like that to my own team, you know. But if they're unlucky enough to not get an injury, it could be a challenging it could be really challenging for those backs. To me, if you look at the overall thing, guys, I don't think necessarily it means all bad news. It just means that one or two things have got to go the Springboks' way, which might be an injury. It could change the whole thing, and you know, you could have a really strong side with the likes of a Pollard in there, and maybe eventually a you know. So it's not all bad. It's still 5 weeks away from the World Cup, but I'm just concerned that now with these build-up games to the World Cup, that the Springboks start playing combinations often enough, especially on your scrum-half, fly-off positions. They need to decide, okay, if Marnie Libbok's number one and they decide on Faf de Klerk as number one, let those guys play a lot of footy, at least the 60 minutes of the first half, and then you can bring up maybe a Damian Willems to start getting him used to also playing 10. Because by their first game against Scotland, if they do not have Pollard in this mix, they just seriously need to have Marnie Libbok in there. And Marnie Libbok needs to play. Marnie Libbok is a great playmaker and a very good fly-off when it comes to running type game, cross-kicking, putting the Springboks on the front foot, the backline on the front foot. But Marnie Libbok is not... Marnie Libbok and Damian Willems is not the best when the Springboks are on the back foot, to kind of strategically kick them out of trouble and get them back on the front foot, which there's only one guy that's really good for the Springboks for that, and that I would say is a Handré Pollard, and he's not there. It's a bit of a mixed match, and a mixed match in the wrong way. Springboks are front heavy, but I'm worried about the backs if they're going to be ready to defend the likes of the speed that Scotland will come at from the backs. Are they going to have one person that they're going to try and develop, one or two people, or are they going to keep changing them around like they have been doing? And just as important, the 9-10 combination, are they going to start playing the same 9-10 combination? And for me, I would say they should have no fears of injuries, because if they get one, they've got a great substitution to come in, probably the most important player that you want. So as he recovers, play full-on rugby. Put your best team on the field. Don't try and save anyone because you fear injuries. And go full-on. Give the same guys a starting opportunity every week so they can get used to game time and get themselves in the right mindset for the World Cup. Guys, it all calls for a very interesting times. And I know from afar, from a Springbok supporter's perspective, I'm also worried. Don't get me wrong. But I think there is enough silver linings. If Pollard didn't go to this World Cup, and didn't, what I mean by that is they're not going to the World Cup, but they still sitting. It's almost like they're sitting there on the bench just waiting. They're just sitting outside. They play a number 34. So they play a number 34. So they're just waiting for the first injury, and they will come back in the mix. So knowing that they're still being considered to be back in the mix within the next 3 to 4 weeks makes me feel a little bit more comfortable with it. Maybe that's just me, a Springbok, trying to comfort myself. And guys, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button below. I'm on my way to 1,000 subscribers, and every one of your subscriptions just gets me that bit closer, and I would appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, and let's watch this closely where the Springboks go with this. Cheers, bye.